One quiet man. A hoodie. A seat they didn't want him in. What started as silent discrimination would explode into a $10 billion disaster. Security dragged him off the plane. They thought he was nobody. They didn't know he could end them. What happened next? No one saw coming. Keep watching. This isn't just a flight. This is how power fights back. It was 7:43 a.m. at Terminal D4 of Los Angeles International Airport when Malik Ford arrived at the gate. He wasn't dressed for attention. A charcoal gray hoodie, clean black jeans, and a pair of black Nikes. His carry-on was a scuffed leather duffel, well used but well kept. No gold watch, no loud logos, no suit. Just composure, silence, and the kind of presence that turned heads for all the wrong reasons. Malik stood quietly in the first-class priority lane, holding out his phone with a glowing QR code that clearly read, Seat 1A, Priority First. But Kyle Brenner, the gate agent in charge, didn't even look at the code. Kyle, 33, polished, white, his SkyLynx blazer fitted just right, had worked Terminal D for nearly 2 years. And in his mind, first class was a sanctuary, a place he silently guarded from outsiders. What that meant depended on the day. Today, it meant Malik. Kyle's smile never showed up. His eyes scanned Malik like an error message on a screen. He leaned toward his colleague, voice low but audible, another upgrade glitch, huh? Then he straightened, looked Malik dead in the eye, and said it, Sir, step aside. Malik blinked once. He hadn't even said a word yet. He looked down at his phone, then back up at Kyle. Behind him, murmurs started to ripple. A man in a Patagonia fleece looked up from his phone. A blonde woman in pearls gave a side glance, then leaned toward her husband. Guess he's in the wrong line, she muttered under her breath. Malik didn't flinch. He didn't ask questions. He just stood still, calm, unreadable, but not invisible. Kyle gestured toward 2 airport security officers standing nearby. Within seconds, they were moving in. One of them, Officer Grant, broad-shouldered, pale, and too used to compliance, stepped in close. Sir, he said with a rehearsed voice, we need to verify your credentials. Please step away from the line. Malik turned slightly, showing his phone again. Is there a problem? Just a quick routine check, Grant replied. But everyone knew what it wasn't. The officer scanned the QR code. Beep. Green light. Verified, Seat 1A. Not an upgrade. Not a mistake. Paid in full. There was a pause. The officer didn't speak. Kyle's expression tightened, almost like he was disappointed. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just silence. Malik was waved back into line like an afterthought. What none of them knew, not Kyle, not the officers, not the privileged passengers whispering behind their hands, was that Malik Ford wasn't just a first-class passenger. He was the Chief Risk Strategist at Everest Holdings, one of the most powerful private equity firms in the nation. And SkyLynx Air was in the final stretch of closing a $9.3 billion merger with Everest. What Malik held in his hand wasn't just a boarding pass. It was a litmus test. The board had sent him not as a VIP, not with security, but as himself. Quiet. Black. Unadorned. To see exactly how SkyLynx treated people when they didn't think it mattered. And now, they had failed. Malik didn't react. He didn't threaten. He didn't reveal who he was. Because there was no need. Let them dig their own hole. He was just here to measure its depth. He walked through the gate as the others looked on, some curious, some smug. None of them knowing that the man they just dismissed so easily could erase their airline's future with a single report. And that report? It had just begun. The moment Malik stepped into the SkyLynx Air first-class cabin, he felt the shift in atmosphere, not from temperature or turbulence, but tension. The cabin was immaculate. Polished mahogany accents, ambient overhead lighting, soft leather seats. A quiet luxury designed to make passengers forget they were in the sky. But Malik didn't forget where he was. He couldn't. He approached seat 1A. Front left. Nearest the cockpit. He reached for the overhead bin to stow his leather duffel when she intercepted him. "Sir, just a moment," the flight attendant said. She was tall, mid-30s, perfectly composed. Her name tag read Savannah Cole. Her voice was professional. Her eyes were guarded. "There's been a minor delay preparing this seat. I'll need you to wait for a few minutes before settling in." Malik paused. "Is there an issue with 1A?" Savannah didn't miss a beat. But she blinked a little too slowly. "No, not exactly," she replied. "It's more of a balance thing. Weight distribution in the front cabin. Just a precaution." He nodded, said nothing, and stepped to the side. He leaned against the bulkhead wall, calmly observing. Behind him, other passengers boarded freely. A man in a hoodie and flip-flops. No delay. A woman with a Gucci carry-on and a dog in a shoulder sling. Straight to her seat. Savannah didn't stop them. No mention of weight distribution. No request for patience. Only him. Malik pulled out his phone and opened a secure notes app titled simply, Everest Audit Log. Entry, SkyLynx Air. Time, 8:12 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Incident, prevented from sitting in pre-assigned 1A under vague, safety rationale. No similar delay for adjacent first-class passengers. He tapped save and slid the phone into his jacket pocket. 5 minutes passed. Then 3 more. At 8:20, Savannah returned with a clipboard and a warmer smile manufactured, but practiced. "You can take your seat now, Mr. Ford," Malik answered. She gave a nod like a transaction had just completed. "Thank you for your understanding." He stowed his bag, took his seat, and leaned back. The cushion was perfect. The seat controls were responsive. There were no signs of technical delay. No maintenance tags. No issues at all. Just an invisible barrier, now slightly lifted. He looked out the window. The sun was higher now, casting long beams over the runway. The shadows on the tarmac matched the mood in the cabin, subtle, but undeniable. Malik adjusted his seatbelt and waited. Minutes later, the service began. A tray of lavender-scented towels moved through the aisle. A middle-aged couple 2 rows behind him received theirs. So did the man in 1C. Then 1D. The tray skipped 1A. No eye contact. No explanation. Savannah passed a second time with pre-departure drinks. Orange juice. Champagne. Sparkling water. She offered it to every row. Skipped 1A. Again. Malik sat still. He didn't raise his hand. Not yet. He reached for his phone again. Entry, SkyLynx Air. Time, 8:26 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Incident, excluded twice during standard first-class service, towel plus beverage. No verbal acknowledgement. No apology. This was more than service failure. It was trained exclusion, the kind that wasn't written in handbooks but embedded in behavior. Savannah passed by again, this time carrying a tray of mimosas. Malik raised a finger, not aggressively, just enough to command awareness. "Excuse me," he said, calm and direct. "I haven't received a towel or a beverage." Savannah blinked. "Oh, I thought you were waiting for someone." "I'm not." She cleared her throat, faltered slightly. "I'll take care of that immediately." A minute later, she returned with a towel. Cold. Unscented. She placed it on his tray and disappeared down the aisle. He unfolded it slowly and dabbed his hands, calm as ever. He logged again. 8:29 a.m. received downgraded towel variant. All others received lavender-scented, heated towels. He looked around the cabin. Everyone else was chatting, sipping, relaxing. And yet, somehow, he was still the anomaly. Malik didn't feel anger. He felt clarity. This wasn't about one gate agent or one attendant. It was the air they breathed. The subtle message behind every glance, every skip, every decision. You don't belong here. But they didn't realize he did. And that made all the difference. It had been just over 30 minutes since Malik Ford settled into his seat, but the tension hadn't eased. It had grown heavier, like the cabin pressure was pressing against more than just skin. Outside the window, Los Angeles shrank beneath the clouds. Inside, Malik remained composed. Silent. Observing. Savannah passed by again. This time, she wasn't carrying anything. No tray. No towels. No fake smile. She clutched a tablet close to her chest. She stopped beside seat 1A, leaned slightly forward, and lowered her voice. "Mr. Ford, may I have a quick word?" Malik met her gaze, unwavering. "Of course." She took a short breath, controlled, but tense. "We've just received a message from flight operations. Due to last-minute adjustments in our weight calculations, I'm afraid we'll need to relocate you to another seat. In the economy cabin." The words dropped into the air like ice in a glass of boiling water. Malik blinked once. "To economy?" Savannah nodded, tapping her tablet. "Yes, I know it's inconvenient, but it's standard protocol when load distribution needs rebalancing." Malik's tone remained even. "So you're removing one person from one seat for weight balance?" "We've reviewed the options," Savannah said quickly. "Yours was the most optimal." Malik tilted his head slightly. "Why wasn't this addressed before takeoff?" "We were only notified recently," she said. But her eyes flickered again. That same pause from earlier. "I paid for this seat in full," he said. "Boarded with a confirmed first-class ticket. And now without a single warning you're asking me, and only me, to move to the back of the plane?" Savannah stiffened. "I understand this may feel targeted," Malik offered. Savannah hesitated. "Unfortunate." A silence fell like a curtain between them. Passengers nearby began to glance toward them. Subtle at first. A magazine lowered. A pair of sunglasses tilted. Whispers crawled across the cabin like static. Malik didn't move. He leaned back slightly, then said, "If there's an actual safety concern, I'll comply. But I want written confirmation of the protocol, and a formal explanation of how I was selected. Over the 7 other passengers in first class." Savannah's jaw clenched. "That won't be necessary. Then neither is moving me." She stared at him for a moment, as if unsure how to respond to a refusal said so calmly. So completely without fear. Then she turned and walked briskly down the aisle, heels clicking like a retreat. Malik returned to his notes. Log entry, SkyLynx Air. Time, 8:52 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Incident, requested to move to economy class mid-flight due to unverifiable weight balance excuse. No documentation. No request made to other passengers. Refused without escalation. He placed the phone face down on his tray table. Across the aisle, a new voice broke the silence. "This is ridiculous." Malik turned his head. The voice belonged to Douglas Fisher, seated in 1B. Gray hair, crisp button-down shirt, polished leather shoes. His eyes locked onto Malik with something between disdain and discomfort. "This isn't a public bus," Douglas muttered, louder than necessary. "It's first class." Malik didn't reply. Douglas leaned back, folding his arms, not trying to hide his tone. I've flown SkyLynx for 2 decades. Never seen behavior like this. Other passengers looked up, curious, cautious. No one intervened. Douglas raised an eyebrow, clearly emboldened. They're just giving out upgrades to anyone now, huh? Savannah reappeared, this time gravitating to Douglas like a safe harbor. Everything all right, Mr. Fisher? He nodded, gesturing lazily toward Malik. Just confused. Thought first class meant something. Savannah offered a sympathetic smile. It still does, sir. Sometimes passengers are upgraded through mileage programs. Happens more than you'd think. Then just loud enough she added. It's unfortunate when others feel uncomfortable because of it. Malik's face remained unreadable. But inside, something shifted. His voice came out clear and low. I didn't use miles. Savannah turned. Excuse me? I paid full price. Seat 1A was not an upgrade. Savannah's mouth opened, then closed. Douglas furrowed his brows. Really? He said, his tone thick with disbelief. Malik looked directly at him, then turned back to Savannah. And even if I had used miles, he said, is dignity not included in the fare? That silenced them both. Savannah gave a stiff nod and disappeared down the aisle. Douglas reached for a magazine he clearly didn't want to read. Malik logged again. 8:57 a.m., passenger in 1B, white male, approximate 50s, made racially coded comments about my seat legitimacy. Flight attendant Savannah Cole acknowledged with implicit agreement. No crew intervention. He folded his arms gently. Let them talk. Let them whisper. Every word was ammunition they didn't know they were handing him. Because Malik Ford didn't need to raise his voice. He just needed them to keep proving him right. Touchdown at Chicago Midway was smooth, too smooth for the storm that was about to break. As the wheels met the tarmac with a muted rumble, seatbelt signs blinked to life. A familiar voice came overhead. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Chicago. Local time is 10:46 a.m. Passengers began to stir, gathering bags, stretching limbs, already texting drivers. For them, the flight was over. But for Malik Ford, the real turbulence was just beginning. Through the narrow oval window, Malik spotted 2 figures standing just outside the jet bridge. Both in Navy SkyLynx uniforms. Both wearing security badges. Both with eyes locked on the aircraft door like wolves guarding an exit. He knew. His fingers tensed slightly on the armrest, but his face didn't move. He reached for his phone and opened the app again. Log entry, SkyLynx Air time, 10:48 a.m. Central Standard Time. Observation, security presence at gate upon arrival. Anticipating escalation. Savannah stood at the front galley, arms folded now. No tablet. No tray. Just posture. Her eyes flicked toward Malik once, then away. But the smirk she tried to suppress told him everything. 30 seconds later, one of the officers stepped onto the plane. He scanned the cabin, expression flat and clinical, until his gaze landed on 1A. Mr. Malik Ford? Malik looked up. Yes? I need you to come with me for questioning. We've received a report of disruptive behavior during the flight. Gasps. Whispers. Heads turned. Even those who had ignored the earlier tension now leaned in with curiosity, some hungry for scandal, others masking judgment behind polite concern. Douglas Fisher smirked in 1B, muttering, knew it was coming. Malik stood slowly, collected his bag, and adjusted his collar. May I ask who filed the report? He said. The officer didn't answer. Please come with me. Malik glanced toward Savannah. She looked away, hands behind her back, posture perfectly aligned like a soldier proud of following orders, no matter how disgraceful. He didn't speak to her. Not yet. Instead, he turned and followed the officer out. They didn't take him through the normal exit. Instead, they led him down a restricted access hallway past employee-only signs, through a dull gray service corridor with flickering fluorescent lights. The world of polished marble and warm tones was long gone. The air here smelled like silence and antiseptic. In a small security room, Malik was asked to sit. One officer stayed inside. Another waited by the door. 5 minutes passed. Then the door opened. A new man entered. Mid-50s. Balding. Expensive watch barely hidden beneath his sleeve. His name tag read: Richard Bannister, Director of Passenger Compliance, SkyLynx Air. He carried a file folder and an air of rehearsed condescension. "Mr. Ford," he said, taking a seat across from him. "We've received multiple complaints from our cabin crew and at least one passenger, claiming you were confrontational, disruptive, and failed to comply with flight staff requests." Malik didn't blink. "I remained seated," he said. "I followed every instruction. I asked for service when others were served. I asked for documentation when my seat was targeted for reassignment. That's not disruption. That's a response to discrimination." Bannister raised an eyebrow, not expecting the poise. "You have no authority to evaluate our flight protocol, sir." Malik reached calmly into his bag. He pulled out a sealed envelope, crisp and white, bearing the embossed insignia of Everest Holdings. "Open it," he said. Bannister hesitated, then slid the letter from its case. As his eyes scanned the contents, his face changed. From skeptical, to confused, to pale. The letter was brief, but unmistakable. It named Malik Ford as Chief Risk Strategist for Everest Holdings, and most critically lead evaluator for the SkyLynx Everest merger. A $9.3 billion deal. And Malik was the man whose signature either sent it to the stars or buried it 6 feet under. "You," Bannister stammered. "I'm the reason your airline might exist next year," Malik said coldly. "And you just dragged me into a holding room like a threat. Based on hearsay." The room fell still. The hum of the security lights now felt deafening. Malik leaned forward slightly. "You treated me like a liability. But I'm actually your final audit." Just then, Bannister's phone vibrated. He snatched it up instinctively. Caller ID, Marilyn Kessler, CEO, SkyLynx Air. He answered. "Yes, ma'am." He didn't get another word in. Malik could hear Marilyn's voice even from across the table. Not shouting but lethal. "Richard, what the hell have you done? Everest just pulled the merger. They've frozen everything." I didn't know," Bannister stammered. "He never identified." "You detained him," she snapped. "Do you have any idea who he is? That man walks into private rooms with foreign presidents. And you paraded him off a plane like he stole his own seat?" The call ended with a sharp beep. Richard looked up at Malik. Sweat now collecting along his brow. I sincerely apologize." "I'm not here for apologies," Malik said, rising to his feet. "I'm here for accountability." By the time Malik Ford exited the security room, SkyLynx was already on fire, not with smoke, but with silence. That kind of silence that blankets a company's headquarters right before the media storm hits. That moment when leadership realizes they've handed a loaded weapon to the wrong side of history, and the trigger's already been pulled. Within hours, Everest Holdings had frozen the $9.3 billion merger. Investor confidence plummeted. Internal messages flagged urgent began flooding C-suites. Legal teams initiated liability reviews. And inside a glass conference room at SkyLynx corporate headquarters, panic was setting in. At the center of it all sat Savannah Cole, in full uniform, but visibly shaken. Her posture, once military straight, had softened. Her lips were tight. Her eyes were fixed on a large monitor playing the internal cabin footage. She watched herself skip Malik's seat for the towel service. Watched herself pretend not to hear his request for a drink. Watched herself deliver a cold towel when others received lavender steam. And most damning, she watched the moment she falsely cited a weight distribution error and attempted to move him to economy. The room was dead silent except for the soft hum of the playback. At the other end of the table, Kyle Brenner, the gate agent who first dismissed Malik at boarding, was sweating through his shirt. He looked smaller than he had a day ago. Much smaller. Beside him sat Douglas Fisher, the smug passenger from seat 1B. Still red-faced. Still quiet. But the false confidence was gone. He was now just a man in a suit, forced to reckon with the trail of his own assumptions. A panel of SkyLynx internal compliance officers sat across from them. One leaned forward. "Ms. Cole. Do you deny any part of the footage you just saw?" Savannah shook her head. "No." "Do you acknowledge you failed to serve a confirmed first-class passenger multiple times and misrepresented operational protocol?" She swallowed. "Yes." "And Mr. Brenner," the officer turned. "You never scanned Mr. Ford's boarding pass, correct?" Kyle opened his mouth, then closed it. "I assumed." "You assumed wrong," the officer snapped. "And it may have just cost this airline its most strategic partnership in a decade." Silence. Then came a new voice, one that made the air go cold. Marilyn Kessler, CEO of SkyLynx Air, stepped into the room. Her heels echoed on the polished tile as she crossed the floor with grim precision. She didn't sit. She didn't smile. She stood at the head of the table and said, "You all judged a man by what you thought he was. By how he looked. By how he didn't react the way you expected." She turned to Savannah. "You treated him like he was invisible." To Kyle. "You dismissed him before he spoke." To Douglas. "And you disrespected him because it made you feel superior." Her voice didn't rise, but her words sliced like razors. "This isn't a public relations nightmare. This is a culture problem. And it ends now." She looked at the compliance panel and gave a single nod. "Effective immediately, Ms. Cole, you are suspended from international routes pending full disciplinary review." Savannah lowered her head. "Kyle Brenner," she continued, "you are terminated. As of this moment." Kyle let out a small breath like he'd been punched in the chest. Marilyn turned to Douglas Fisher last. "And you, Mr. Fisher, consider this your final flight with SkyLynx. You're officially blacklisted. Permanently." Douglas looked like he might protest, but nothing came out. Just a quiet nod. A man realizing too late that entitlement is not immunity. Marilyn turned toward the door. "This meeting is adjourned." But she didn't leave. Not yet. Because just then, her phone buzzed. She answered. "Yes?" A pause. Then she turned back to the room. "He's requesting a board meeting. Now." 1 hour later, Malik Ford stood inside the Everest SkyLynx Emergency Summit. He wasn't angry. He wasn't loud. But when he opened his folder and laid out Clause 14C of Everest's Strategic Ethics Mandate, every executive in that room knew. This wasn't about feelings anymore. This was about survival. The boardroom at Everest Holdings wasn't designed to comfort, it was designed to confront. The long obsidian table reflected every flicker of the city skyline beyond the 87th floor. Chicago's glass towers shimmered outside the wall of windows, but inside, the mood was steel. No smiles. No introductions. No distractions. At the head of the table stood Malik Ford, no longer just a passenger. No longer just a name on a flight manifest. Now, he was the arbiter of a $9.3 billion reckoning. Across from him sat 11 board members. On screen, in a high-priority live video call, were SkyLynx executives, CEO Marilyn Kessler, COO Darrell Lang, and the company's general counsel. All three looked paler than their profile pictures. The silence in the room was taut like piano wire. Malik opened his folder. "This," he said, sliding a document to the center of the table, "is Clause 14C of Everest's Strategic Ethics Mandate." No one interrupted. The clause had only been invoked twice in the firm's 37-year history, and both times, it resulted in the total restructuring of a partner organization. Malik continued. Clause 14C authorizes a complete internal audit of the partner company's executive leadership, frontline training protocols, and customer conduct policies. It also gives Everest Holdings final veto authority on any leadership decisions made in the next 12 months. The room didn't move, and it allows Everest to pause, cancel, or absorb any deal under review, should the culture of the partner be deemed ethically compromised. He let the weight settle. Marilyn, clearly struggling to keep composure, finally spoke. "Mr. Ford, I want to personally apologize." Malik raised a hand. "Apologies won't restore what happened on that plane. Nor will they address the pattern of assumptions your staff operated under. This wasn't one rogue agent. It wasn't an isolated incident. It was how you functioned when you thought no one important was watching." He turned to the Everest board. "This is about more than just SkyLynx. This is about precedent." He slid the next page across the table. Everest's counteroffer. SkyLynx had two choices. Option A. Submit to a full internal audit. Immediate removal or suspension of any staff named in the official report. Creation of an external diversity and equity oversight committee chaired by Everest. Mandatory quarterly anti-bias training across all departments, including corporate leadership. Public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, including a published apology in 3 major outlets. 1-year probationary partnership, during which SkyLynx would forfeit negotiation power on any operational merger terms. Option B. The deal collapses. Everest acquires SkyLynx's commercial assets at liquidation value 6 months later. The silence that followed was brutal. Marilyn's voice cracked slightly. "You want us to hand over control of our own boardroom?" "No," Malik said. "You already did that. The moment you dragged me off that plane like I didn't belong." He folded his hands. "I'm not asking for revenge. I'm offering reform. But you're going to feel it. Because until now, airlines have written off stories like mine as anecdotes. PR fires you smother with hashtags and scripted empathy." His voice dropped a note, cold and resolute. "Not this time." A younger board member from SkyLynx cleared his throat, voice tense. "And if we refuse these terms?" Malik didn't blink. "Then in 6 months, I'll buy what's left of you. 4 pennies." He stood, closed the folder, and looked at both rooms, those in flesh, and those on screens. "People like me aren't asking to be let in anymore. We're holding the keys. The question isn't whether we deserve a seat." His eyes locked on Marilyn's. "It's whether you deserve the sky." 2 weeks later, airports across the country began whispering a new phrase into policy rooms and training manuals, the Ford Standard. Because Malik didn't just change the future of SkyLynx. He changed what power looked like when it finally refused to bow. The term first appeared in a Slack message between 2 airline executives. "Do we have a Ford Standard in place yet?" It was casual. A reflex. But within weeks, it wasn't just a message, it was policy. 2 weeks after the boardroom reckoning, SkyLynx Air was unrecognizable. Their sleek homepage now featured a bold new section, "Our Commitment to Equity." Inside it, a letter of public apology, signed by CEO Marilyn Kessler. A list of new reforms, all modeled after Everest's demands. A new department, Passenger Dignity Assurance, led by a diverse executive panel. And, for the first time in the company's 38-year history, a zero-discretion clause for all frontline workers, eliminating subjective authority to deny or delay service. Savannah Cole was removed from international routes indefinitely. Kyle Brenner's employment file was publicly referenced in an internal case study titled, "How Assumptions Become Expensive." Douglas Fisher? Never seen on a SkyLynx plane again. But the impact didn't stop at one company. Airlines across the country began whispering Malik's name not in press conferences, but in boardrooms. Jetstream initiated its own cultural audit. AeroBlue created an unbiased upgrade training program. Continental Horizon brought in secret travelers to test first-class behavior across race, age, and attire. And they weren't doing it for virtue. They were doing it because Malik Ford proved what one quiet man with full receipts and total control could do to a brand's value in a single afternoon. Malik, however, didn't give interviews. He didn't tour newsrooms. Didn't post hashtags or hashtag discrimination flight videos. He simply kept working. And that, somehow, made the story even more terrifying to executives. The man who destroyed their illusion of immunity didn't want applause. He wanted change. Months later, in a quiet corner of O'Hare International, Malik prepared to board a red-eye to New York. Slate coat. Black carry-on. Wireless earbuds. As ordinary as ever. At gate 16, a young black attendant noticed his name on the manifest. Her breath caught for a moment. She looked up, unsure if it was really him. Then, as Malik approached, she smiled, not the fake kind, but genuine, full of something between gratitude and quiet awe. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Ford," she said. "Thank you for flying with us." Malik paused. He hadn't heard that phrase in months without a sting behind it. But this time? It felt right. He nodded. "Thank you. It's good to be seen." An unofficial industry phrase. A quiet revolution. A man in seat 1A who didn't fight with fists or fire, he just refused to shrink. Power doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes, it walks quietly in a hoodie and rewrites history. The Malik Ford standard. Respect everyone. Because the person you dismiss today might own the decision that defines your tomorrow. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just documented. And that's how he changed everything. Don't mistake silence for weakness. Malik Ford was quiet, but his silence cost them $4 billion. The most dangerous kind of power? The one that doesn't ask to be seen, but makes you remember it forever.